almost all organizations that we're working with today, we've been helping our organizations implement project portfolio agile management solutions for many years. Almost every organization is managing projects in a hybrid fashion. That might mean that they have certain projects that are traditional waterfall, certain projects that are a combination of waterfall and agile, and obviously they have certain ones that are agile as well. We've also found that most organizations are still doing the traditional budgeting and planning from a financial perspective and resource management perspective, and then kind of picking and choosing how to do their actual execution from a hybrid or agile perspective. So you can see here just from the recent project management report also supports that many organizations are managing their project investments in a hybrid fashion. So it's definitely a key area. It's definitely a key area for ServiceNow investing here in their product suite. They're really investing heavily around the enterprise agile planning solutions. So they're already in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, but they're making some good investments here to continue to enhance their capabilities in that space. I typically tell customers that one of the advantages of ServiceNow is the ability to really manage hybrid projects, the combination of traditional and agile projects all on the same platform, so all with the same capabilities. So you can do that seamlessly all within ServiceNow. You don't need any other solutions, or you can actually then integrate into, say, your agile tool of choice. So out of the box, there's integration in with Jira, as well as integration in with Azure DevOps. So you can do it in that fashion as well. So if you have an agile team that's already using those tools, and you can bring that information in, and that way the PMO can have visibility into the activities that are going on with their different development teams. So when you look at the hybrid project delivery from a ServiceNow perspective, we kind of see this overall life cycle here from a hybrid project delivery perspective. So one thing that ServiceNow has, and this kind of ties into the enterprise agile planning from an industry analyst perspective, they feel that's definitely important. And so ServiceNow's investment funding capability has been out for a few releases. And so that's where you can actually fund strategies or fund business unit or fund programs. Obviously, you can come down and fund projects. So that's more top-down funding. So that's available if that's something that the organization needs. Then from an intake perspective, right? So that could be the ideation, the innovation way to receive intake to start managing your backlog, or that can also mean using the demand management function where you're going to go through a more formal business case, do your financial estimates, your resource estimates there. Many organizations start out with ideation that flows into demand management. But for pure agile organizations, they probably focus just more on the ideation capabilities. Next, when we come into the planning, this is going to highlight where some of the new capabilities are within ServiceNow. So the biggest area of investment right now is in the roadmap planning called the Alignment Workspace. And so they have some exciting new things coming out in the next release, and release 2 of roadmap planning, i.e. the Alignment Workspace, came out here in Rome in version 2. So version 3 will be coming out in the San Diego release in March. Recently, they released the Scrum programs. So that's for organizations that are using traditional Agile Scrum methodology for their Agile development activities and planning. And ServiceNow has added in the program capabilities, so you can start looking across multiple Scrum teams and looking at dependencies across those teams. So it's kind of a stepping stone between pure Scrum and going into the Skilled Agile framework for the enterprise. And so we're going to highlight there from managing programs from a Scrum perspective. And then there's also the Skilled Agile framework for enterprise. We see very few organizations doing that. If they are doing it, they might be doing it in pockets. So typically that means you have a large portion of your organization doing Agile development. It also typically means and requires that you own the whole entire value chain. So both from a business unit perspective, everyone in the business is functioning from an Agile perspective, owns that whole entire value chain. They all work together, same thing on the technology side. So there are some dependencies, and that's why that's less of an adoption from our experience with customers. Then from an execution perspective, I like to kind of say that customers can do the execution based on their tool of choice. So in ServiceNow, you've got their agile capabilities, the safe capabilities we just talked about. Also within ServiceNow, you've got the DevOps capabilities where you can tie into your GitHub and those functions. The DevOps solution is now part of ITSM Professional Edition, so just as an FYI. And then you've got your Agile integrations for those tool of choice from an execution perspective. I mentioned earlier that you've got out-of-the-box integrations there with Jira or with Azure DevOps. We have done many custom integrations for organizations too. So if you have other Agile tools, those can be integrated as well. And then from a tracking perspective, you have your performance analytics, your investment portal. Some of you might have seen and used the performance analytics for your PMO dashboard. There's also the Agile performance analytics. That's at the release level, the sprint level, also down to your team level. So you've got a lot of those out-of-the-box analytics. The investment portal is really powerful. I see that more on the traditional side, but that's where we see actually CIOs, COOs actually using that to monitor their investments, monitor the overall performance of their various portfolios, as well as the different investments that they've made. It's an opportunity to also kind of view the overall timeline. So that's kind of one view here, looking at it from an end-to-end hybrid delivery perspective, mapping to the various modules here within ServiceNow. Next, if we come back here and kind of look at it more from a traditional PPM perspective, but putting it in the frame of hybrid. So most organizations that are doing hybrid, and as I mentioned before, almost 100% of organizations are doing hybrid of some form. They're typically doing some type of an intake process. So whether it's using the ideas in the idea portal, or whether it's just using the self-service portal for ideas, and or using it for demands, they have that intake process here that they're trying to understand what their needs are and what the costs are associated with the proposed projects. Here we're kind of highlighting the out-of-the-box set of states that you'd manage a demand through. Out of the box, they have the demand surveys. Typically, it's more of an advanced function to look at rating and ranking your different demands. And then you can set up and configure your different approvals. So there's different levels that you can do there. You can obviously do your solution planning here by doing your resource estimates, your cost estimates here with the resource plans and the cost plans. And then you can complete here with your demands. Once you've categorized, prioritized, you've got your estimates, then you can move into the portfolio planning to make those final decisions. And then at that point, it becomes a project. Why most organizations still go through this, what you might call a traditional flow here, is because executives are typically still managing things traditionally. They're still looking at things in terms of dollars and resources. And so this supports that ability. But then when you're managing that project, it could just be a shell of a project to track those financials and resources, but still allowing the team then to function in their execution method of choice, Agile perspective. We do see a lot of organizations where some of the activities for the project are still in a traditional waterfall portion of the project, and other pieces of it are looked at it from an Agile perspective. So just as an FYI. So just kind of want to paint the picture that at the highest level, we still see a lot of organizations manage this end-to-end process while still doing hybrid. Next, I want to kind of highlight and kind of show from a ServiceNow perspective, and they recently kind of released this viewpoint here on hybrid project management. And so we kind of have two scenarios. We see most organizations following scenario A from a hybrid project management perspective. So it's really a combination of waterfall tasks as part of your project combined with then various agile sprints or activities occurring. The scenario B here is really for organizations that have adopted the Scaled Agile framework, and they're planning more from a pure Agile perspective and starting off with an overall portfolio. So different set of requirements for these organizations, but I'm going to kind of highlight here how that is enabled in ServiceNow and how ServiceNow puts that together from an architecture perspective. So if we come here to the first scenario one here for hybrid project management, and like I said, this is where we see majority of all customers here from a hybrid perspective, where you've got various sets of activities that you're still requiring the organization to complete up front, say with your initiating and planning, and then you've got your various different sprints going on here as part of your execution activities. You might have some additional go live activities here, readiness for operations and transition to operations going on here from a delivering perspective. And then here we look at things from an overall closeout on your project. And this is a differentiator in ServiceNow that you can do this all on the same platform. You can manage the waterfall activities as well as the sprint, and you can get visibility to that here at the project level. So if we look at that from an overall execution and architecture perspective, we can kind of then see looking at things from an intake perspective. Here again, this is the lens from an Agile perspective. So like I said, with intake, you've got your ideation, innovation portal. You could do the traditional way of having demands coming in. The demands are highlighted here. Typically, ideas would flow into demands. Here again, a large part of organizations just start off here with a demand. One thing that just introduced here in the Rome release is a universal request. So some organizations are really excited about that. So you could have this really generic universal request. That request could then determine if from that request, do I need to go create an epic, right? And we need to run things down here and go start managing things from an epic perspective. Or does that universal request, no, that's an idea. We send that into the innovation portal. Then from there, we move it into demand for our business case. So just kind of a high level review here. One of the new area here is the universal request. But you can see here from this kind of best practice architecture, you're going to go through this intake process, make sure that fits your particular organization's need. And then as appropriate, you might do the demand management function, or maybe those ideas flow into the epics and you're just going to manage your overall backlog. Next, you can see here as part of that new alignment planner, that roadmap planning capability. And this kind of ties into the enterprise agile planning function that the industry analysts are looking for. So here you can come in here and you can set up hierarchical based roadmaps, as well as you can what they call ad hoc roadmaps. And you can align those by strategy. You can actually bring in and look at planning for projects or for demands or even for epics. So you can do that in a hybrid fashion. So it's not just traditional work such as demands and projects. It also includes the agile work such as epics. We talked a little bit about the investment funding. So that's also available if you're trying to do that top-down investment funding. So that solution has been out for a couple of different releases. And so that's coming together. The one thing you don't see in this view here is the the portfolio planning workbench for scenario planning. So you don't see that here. Obviously, you could include that here as part of your overall process, as part of your what if analysis to make sure that you've got enough resources as well as enough funding to take on the work. From what I've seen and my understanding in the future is that they're going to be adding in investment funding and the portfolio planning workbench into the alignment workspace. So some exciting things on the horizon. I've seen some of that, so I'm assuming some of that's going to be coming out in San Diego release, but yet to be determined. And so the function down here, when you look at from an execution perspective, from a hybrid perspective in this scenario where I'm still going to have my project and I'm still going to manage my different waterfall tasks, well, I can now create an agile phase within my project. That's going to be related to the various teams. So I can pick which different assignment groups, and then I'm going to pick the specific sprints. So as a PMO and a project manager, traditional project manager, I can get visibility into my actual waterfall tasks. I can get visibility into my agile functions, and then I can do my traditional management around my resources, my financials, my status reports, so I can still do all my traditional items while still getting visibility in all the Agile work as well as the traditional project work. In terms of where the Agile work would reside, so the Agile work can be done 100% in ServiceNow. It's kind of depicted here, right? So you can have your products and your epics and your Agile teams. You can do your overall releases and release backlog. That can all be done. One thing that's really nice here for organizations doing everything on the platform is the unified backlog. So it's a real powerful solution. So say if you happen to be managing your incidents or other service desk tickets, you can basically take those entities, whether they be an incident or a problem or a request. Basically in one click, you can turn that item into backlog item, and it's basically going to create a story in conjunction with that incident and add it into the backlog. So then you can start using that for planning purposes, and then obviously roll it into your different sprints. Now for organizations that want to continue with their different Agile tool of choice, highlighting here the different out-of-the-box integrations in with Jira or Azure DevOps. So that's kind of looking at from a overall architecture perspective for that scenario number one that we see most organizations doing from a hybrid project management perspective. And next here, if we to look at things from a scenario number two. So the big thing here with scenario number two, this is for organizations that are really went to that scaled Agile framework. And so typically for that scaled Agile framework, you are going to start and do a lot of things here from a portfolio perspective. Then you're going to manage programs and your program increments as an example. But you can see here, even in this level, we still see organizations doing some of the traditional entities such as the demands and projects. And then down here, looking at things in terms of the actual safe capabilities. But if you were to move to this function, the portfolios themselves are also used in the safe capability because safe utilizes the function of a portfolio. Here's that unified backlog that was shown on that previous slide, but in a very small fashion. And so here with this Scaled Agile framework, that's where you're going to have those program increments. You're going to manage your Agile release trains here. Then we manage your different sprints. So you can manage things in that fashion. You'll notice here from an architecture perspective, you could tie this into DevOps on the platform. As I mentioned earlier, that's part of the ITSM Professional Edition. So the next here, when we look at that from an architecture perspective, it's very similar to the previous slide, except for here from an execution perspective, in most cases, we're just really managing things from a safe perspective here. You still might have some of that traditional project view here, so you can see that traditional project views here. We've got that advanced Scrum program capability on the Agile side. So that's kind of that bridge for organizations that are trying to mature from the Scrum Agile process into the safe methodology. So this kind of gives you kind of the view how you would move to this scenario number two. As I mentioned, very, very few organizations we see with scenario number two. Almost 100% are using scenario number one. A couple other things just to highlight here. I wanted to highlight that the unified Agile backlog. So that's an example here. In this case, we're in a view here with the Scrum enterprise backlog. Here we're currently on the team-based view and looking at the overall backlog. What you can do is you can set up your triage board, and you can see here we've got defects or enhancements, we have problems or incidents. So all those other entities that you might be managing here in ServiceNow, we can see how many we have as part of your backlog. Instead of having to do swivel chair, dual entry, you can just come in and select the different incidents and then say add, and those would be added to your backlog. And you'd be able to see the source record, the incident, as well as the story. And now that you've created that story, you can use that in your backlog planning, move it over into your sprint planning, and then move it into your overall execution. So great capability, definitely saves a lot of time and effort there. One thing we do see some organizations say if they're using another Agile tool. As part of the integration, you could still want to use the Unified Agile. This way you'd have all of your different incidents and problems, but then you could come in here and say you want to add those to your backlog, and depending on how you have your integration set up, right, it would create those stories here in ServiceNow. It would also then create those automatically in your Agile tool of choice based upon the integration. So just as an FYI, and that way you can also reduce the dual entry or swivel chair in your Agile tool of choice. Next here, this is actually looking at the Scaled Agile Framework board, but it's very similar into the Scrum board here in program, so we'll get in and show that in the demonstration. But you get to start to look across different teams. You can drag and drop the backlog items into the different sprints. You can start to see some of the different dependencies here across the different teams, across the different sprints. So that's a really nice capability for organizations that aren't ready yet to go to the Scaled Agile framework. Also, you'll have various out-of-the-box metrics, so they continue to add in additional KPIs. Some of these are actually even performance analytics, so you'll be able to look at that kind of delivery performance view. So you can do that both at the release, the sprint, as well as the actual team level. So there's some really nice out-of-the-box report, as well as indicators that you can review. For those of you that are interested in DevOps, so kind of a side note here, but the ServiceNow DevOps does tie into, as you can see here, a lot of the standard tools that your team might be using for automating the deployment of changes. And so that's available. This particular solution for the DevOps is part of the IT Service Management Professional Edition. Before I jump into the actual presentation, I wanted to kind of show some of the solutions that our customers are taking advantage of. We will having a couple of hybrid solutions coming up here in the first quarter of 2022. So we'll definitely have some of those options for you. Just wanted to highlight here and some examples here. So what we like to do is we like to provide customers with visibility into the data that they're using to enter into the system. A lot of times they're looking for ways to have a very nice report. They want to extract that out into PDF. They want to extract that out into PowerPoint. And so we create these various report portals. So we're using the core technology with ServiceNow, the service portal, so that's upgradable in that fashion, but it can be very richly used here for the organization. So this one here is kind of a hybrid combination of bringing in some of your operational work as well as your project work. So a great way to understand what's going on and view things from a work management perspective. We've done multiple views here from an overall project financials. So if you wanted to be able to dive into the financials, if you wanted to track variances, things of that nature that aren't necessarily in the system, you can easily do that here by setting up the different report portals. We've had multiple organizations where we've created a very nice business case. That way they can have that available for executives. And so it's an easy way to analyze and approve your different demands. We've also have kind of expanded business cases. So more information, this is more of your narrative here. But then with the phase 2, page 2 actually, we have that showing kind of your detailed financials and your financial summary. So some good capabilities there as well. Next here, kind of looking at status reports. So we do a lot of program and project status reports for customers. So these can be any type of layout and format. And so we have very innovative views here. These can be exported to PowerPoint, obviously to PDF as well. And so very powerful in terms of your status reports. Here's just another example of another unique status report here from a 2-page example, kind of showing you different stages and the time it takes to go through the different stages. So this is kind of page 1. Here's page 2. So you've got different views here. So really a great way to provide value back to the organization by taking advantage of some of these configured portals. So if you have an interest there, you can definitely follow up with us. So I'm going to jump into the demonstration now and show some of those new capabilities that are available here for hybrid project management.
Could you let us know about what licenses you're using and how to access this information?
Yeah, so for the capabilities that we're going to be showing here, some of it is the ITBM standard, some of it is the ITBM professional. I'll highlight a few items that would be specific to professional, but it's a combination of standard and professional what I'll be showing today. Obviously, professional includes everything in terms of ITBM standard licensing perspective. So obviously, many of you probably used the performance analytics, or you're looking at using ServiceNow. And so this is out of the box capability. I have a couple of things here that have been configured. So this is kind of starting to show you kind of a view from a hybrid perspective. So out of the box, the PMO dashboard is all kind of traditional, but here we're looking at some epics here into the overall board. What's nice here with this board is you can slice and dice the information, roll up and roll down the information. Also, you've got your performance analytics here. You can kind of look at your trending information. In this case here, I'm kind of bringing in stuff from an epics perspective. And then here's kind of looking at things from a project health perspective. We're working with multiple customers right now and doing conversions here and bringing in traditional as well as hybrid agile metrics here and indicators all on the same page. But in this case here, we're looking at that from a traditional perspective. So I'm going to go over here into the planning workbench. And this is the alignment workspace, officially called. Actually, no, that's the wrong one. I don't want to go into that one. Let me come over here. I'm going to go into the alignment workspace. So this is release 2 that just came out. And so the alignment workspace is available in standard edition. It's also available in the professional edition. So the professional edition allows you to do the hybrid. So here we can look at demand, project, and epic. So this is kind of that hybrid HR roadmap. And so that's only available in the professional edition. In the standard edition, it would just be your demand and project roadmap. With release 2 here, you have the ability to have the hybrid, the hierarchical. So you get to configure and set up your different organization units here. So in this case, I've got portfolio and enterprise. And in this case, I'm looking at my different portfolios. And so here we've got this overall roadmap. There's 2 different views here. I can do my overall planning. And so you can kind of decide how you want the look and feel of your roadmap. So first of all, you've got various settings here that you can come over here and say, how do I want to group the information? So in this case, I'm grouping it by type, but I could come in here and group it by other entities if I want to look at it by priority here, so I can do that. I can also kind of identify what do I want to show on the actual bars themselves. So I can show information here on the different bars, and I can also display my milestones. So it's a little more limited here in terms of the hierarchical, but I'll show you more of that power in the ad hoc view. So when you're here in my overall strategic planning, what you can do here, this is really looking at, let me go step back. So say you've already got in the system, you've already got some demands, you've already got some epics, you already have some projects. You can have those items here. Those items would flow into the alignment workspace, and then you can drag and drop those here into your overall roadmap. So this is kind of more from a planning perspective. Once they're in here, right, I can adjust the overall timeline associated with those. So I can adjust the timeline here. What it's really doing, it's updating the new fields that they've recently added in, the approved start date, the approved end dates. So you'll be able to see, and those individuals that are managing the demand or managing the actual project would see those dates, and those would be the approved dates, and then they would need to update their project or demand to coincide with these planning dates. So that's the way the system is out of the box. You could automate some of that, but out of the box, it's going to update these approved dates. Also here, because it's strategic planning, you have a quick, easy interface here to add more items to your overall roadmap. So say if I wanted to add another epic here to my roadmap, I can come in here and say I want to add a new shopping cart So I could come in here and add a new shopping cart in here. I'm going to identify initially what I want those dates to be. So I can say we really want this to start in February time frame, and we can say when we want this to end. Maybe that's going to be in the April time frame, and so we could identify that. So that's simple here, and we can add that to our board here as we're just doing some high-level planning. And we can start to see that we now have this new shopping cart epic here. So from a hybrid planning perspective, I can then drag this along and change the overall timeline. I could condense this as well. And what it's going to do is going to update those overall approved start dates. As you can see here, it's automatically updating those dates. So this is how you can kind of plan things. You can see here you can have an overall set of milestones that you can set. Here is a part of your overall roadmap. So I could come over here and I can add a different milestone. So there's different types. So a key event, launch, important date, deadline. So I can add in additional milestones. And that's what you see here, some milestones that I entered in earlier. So I've got a committee review, or I've got this as a key event here. I got a key deadline coming up here. So you kind of use that visualization here as you're starting to do your planning. So this is definitely a strategic planning tool. I can also toggle this back over if I wanted to look at this from a tracking perspective. And so now I can start to see the red, yellow, green here of these particular items. I have additional information that's showing up here. So now we're looking at this demand and we're seeing those approved start dates, but I'm seeing percent complete. I'm seeing some of the planned cost associated with those items. If I come over here from an Epic, I can kind of see the same information here. Same thing if I were to toggle over here and look at it from a project perspective. So the same type of view, but now I just get that additional information. I can kind of come over here and see why that information is showing up. So showing on the bar here, we wanted the owner, we wanted the status, we wanted the percent complete, we wanted to show the planned cost, the planned capital expense there. So I could say I want different information here. I could say I wanted to show the ROI. So I could look at the ROI on there as well. So I can kind of pick and choose which data elements I want to show on the different views here. So nice set of capabilities here to kind of track what's going on as you're doing your overall strategic planning. Then you could toggle back over here and then go back to that strategic planning. So that's the hierarchical, and you can kind of set that up and you get to configure and set up your own hierarchy here in the hierarchical roadmaps. The next here you can come over and look at things from an ad hoc roadmap perspective. And so this is where you get to kind of come in and define your own specific roadmap. So I could come over here and set up your own specific roadmap. You can see here that I can identify kind of what's the source table for that particular roadmap here. So I can identify what type of items I'm going to use for my roadmap. So you can see here, change or demands or epics, programs. So you can kind of do different types of roadmaps. Here I've got a couple of different example roadmaps. So I can go in here and look at this initiatives strategy roadmap. They have introduced a lightweight version of initiative, and my understanding is they're planning on scaling that over time. But in this particular view, the initiatives are really just projects. And what we're seeing here, we've got some different ways to slice and dice the information. So here we're kind of aligning our different initiatives, i.e. projects here based upon the strategies. So delight customers and then the goals associated with those strategies. So we now get to kind of have a view here of what's going on in this particular roadmap. In this example, we're already in the tracking view. So I could toggle it back over here to the planning view. And so now I could come over here and create a new item. So based upon the item that you set up for your roadmap, right, you'd be able to create the different types of items here into your ad hoc overall roadmap. So in this case, it'd be a nice, easy way to create a brand new project. So just like how I showed earlier with creating that epic, you could just come in here and put in your actual project name and put in those approved start dates. So that's how you can kind of come in here and kind of create your own ad hoc overall roadmap. Also, here's an example here where I'm going to have a lot of other projects that are already in the system. And so I can take these right and I can basically just drag and drop these over into the actual board here. Also, there's more information here. You can start to see there's more information here about the project. So I have some summary information about the project itself. Then down here, I can actually go in and actually edit the project. So this is kind of a precursor. They're going to, my understanding, make a lot more updates here so you can manage your projects in the workspace versus the traditional UI. So just as they're continuing to make investments in that type of capabilities. So you kind of can drill into the information. You can take those existing projects, drag and drop, add them here into your overall roadmap. So that's how you would do your roadmap planning from an ad hoc perspective. Here's where you do the drag and drop. Can't do that in the tracking mode, but I can bring that over here. It obviously has to line up with the specific roadmap items, and I can add that here right to the overall roadmap. Then I can come in here and adjust the schedule associated with that. So that's how you can kind of drag and drop those existing projects. The idea of unscheduled items, it's really a function of there's not an approved start or end date yet. And so that's when you can kind of drag and drop, bring those over here and add those onto your different pages. So you can see here, it's going to give you a warning here that do you want to change the strategies or goals that particular item is currently assigned to. So you probably can do that scheduling without that particular type of change as an example. So that's a key component. Like I said, I think they're really going to be doing some additional capabilities, potentially in San Diego release, maybe adding in the investment funding, potentially that scenario, what if planning capability here in the San Diego release. So we'll see here in the next month or two. So that's kind of looking at the overall roadmap planning. And as we can see there from that hierarchical view, we could do that hybrid type of planning. So the next thing I wanted to do, and I'm going to go over here from an Agile perspective. Let me come over here and go. Here's my program manager from an Agile perspective. So I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to go to this dashboard here first. So this is a configured dashboard as an example for a product owner. And so you're managing your backlog and you're managing your different stories. So you're managing things in an agile fashion. So we can look at here the different configured and set up reports here on the product owner dashboard page here as an example. So then if I wanted to come over here and look at things from an agile board perspective, we can come over here and this is where I can do that program level planning while still functioning in the Scrum Agile Development capabilities. So this is the Agile 2.0 capabilities here within ServiceNow. So it's not the Scaled Agile framework, but one of the newer things that just came out is the program planning capability. So now we can start looking at planning across different teams, their individual backlogs here, and I can take their individual backlogs for the different teams. I can drag and drop that over here, into the different sprints. So you can review that information here across your different sprints. You can see the different dependencies as well across the different sprints and across the different teams. So nice set of capability here that you can use as well. So this is that kind of overall, if you will, new planning capability here with the Agile 2.0. The traditional capability here, if we come back into looking at it from a team perspective, if we come back over here to the backlog view, this relates to that unified Agile capability, i.e. the triage board. So this is where you can come in here and you can set up your different triage items. In this case, I can see the incidents that I've already set up, but you can easily come in and create a new triage board. As you can see here, a lot of your different entities, really any of the different entities, you can add those in here. So if I wanted to bring in problems, maybe I want to add those to my backlog, I could come in here and type that in as problem, and I could submit and add that to my overall triage board. Let me come back here to my board here. So if I click down here, I can now see that there's 71 problems and there's various incidents here. So what I wanted to highlight is you can have those entities added here. You could have your requests in here as well if you're doing that on your service desk. So I can come in here and say, let's go add some of these incidents to our backlog. So I can come over here and I can add a couple of those incidents here and I can say add to the backlog. So it's automatically creating a story and it's going to associate that story to that incident. So if we were to come down to the bottom here, we'd be able to see some of that new item. If I go in here and look at that, we can see that the incident record is still here. So I've got the data source where that item came from, but we can also see the story associated with it. So now I can use it for my backlog planning. I didn't have to do a dual entry. I have that all here in my backlog planning. Right, then I can move that over into my sprint planning here. Then I can move into my actual sprint tracking here as you're managing your agile work. So as we mentioned before, you can do all of your agile development here within ServiceNow. And that can be all managed here, or you could have that integration in with your agile tool. One thing I'd like to add here, as you're doing your sprint tracking, a lot of customers really like the ability here of coming over to the list view and being able to manage and break down those stories either into tasks or manage and create actual test cases for those stories and then actually run that particular test case. So I could toggle over here and say if I wanted to look at the different tasks. So in this case, I've got new tasks associated with the story. So I can break that down. I can track those tasks for completion. Or I can come over here and look at things from an overall test perspective. In this case here, I've already got a test set up. And we can see here that previous test failed. And because I've got that test case set up, I could say, let's go on up and run that test case. I could enter in the name of my test run here, and I can say, now let's go run that test. So what it's going to do is going to prompt me through the different steps that I need to follow in that various test case. And then there's going to be various items that I need to complete here that I'm supposed to do my validation. So sign in occurred, but I need to make sure I can log in to the cart. And then I could come over and say, well, actually, I didn't see my other test step. And I could put in comments associated with that. And I could even attach, say, my screenshot with that. At that point, I could say I'm done. And I can still see here that I've got a failed test run. I can actually go in here and look at that particular test case. I can see those steps that I can manage. I can actually create new versions of my test case, so I could add additional steps or change the steps. I can also then see the different test results here associated with my overall test case. So you can kind of manage it in that fashion. In this case, we could run this again. And then we could come through here and say, yeah, everything looks good. We're going to complete that. And now we can see we're now moved this over to a passed state. So there is a end-to-end kind of test management 2.0 capability. But we see a lot of organizations getting value just here out of the simple test cases tied to your stories. So those of you that are managing your agile projects in that fashion, that can be very beneficial. So that's kind of looking at things from an agile perspective. I did want to just highlight the different dashboards. So we mentioned that there's out-of-the-box dashboards here. This is the Agile 2.0. You have the same type of reporting here from a scaled agile framework perspective. So if I wanted to come in here and look at it from a release perspective, we can see some of that out-of-the-box capability. So we can look at stories completed here. We can look at burn down charts here as well. I wonder if I've got one that's got the actual data here. So we've got the stories completed. Here we've got our burn down chart. We've got our burn up chart here. So we can view that information. That's here out of the bottom. This is for the prior release. There's more that I can see from a current release perspective. So let's go to the actual release dashboard. So yeah, this is where I'm showing the actual scope here, the percent complete associated with that. I'm looking at the release, burn down, burn up charts here as well. And then we can look at some cycle time. If you're going to manage it at the team level, I can come over here to the team dashboard here. And so I can start to see the active stories, the time in each state here, the cycle time here across your different stories. Look at some of your sprint performance here around velocity here. Then we can get into some good cycle times here with your stories as well. Here again, we need to select our different teams. So that's how you can kind of come in here and get access to these out-of-the-box reports as well. The next thing I wanted to do is kind of go into the traditional project side and kind of show that hybrid project management from the traditional project side. So I'm going to come over here into the project workspace for a project manager. Then I'm going to go in and look at this new hybrid project so we can see how you can manage this hybrid project. So those of you that are familiar with the workspace, you've got various different functions, various different visibility and reports you can manage here with your project. This is a hybrid project, so we can actually see the number of stories that are tied to this project. We can see the tasks here. Now you can always add additional reports here. So in this case here, we're looking at upcoming tasks and overdue tasks, etc., associated with this particular project. What I wanted to go in and look at here is the actual planning console. So this is where you start to see the convergence of the traditional as well as the Agile from a hybrid perspective. So you can still use your templates. You can still have your traditional waterfall sequential set of activities. You can assign people to the work. But then down here we can see that we've actually have a development execution activity, a sprint going on. We have another sprint going on here as well. So we can see that that work's occurring. We can actually go in and get visibility into that work by toggling over here to the workbench. So we can come over here and look at the workbench. So it's going to look at these different phases here. And if I come down here and I want to look at the actual sprint here, so I can see the sprint, it's actually then going to show me the different stories that the development team is working on. Now these stories could be stories that are natively here in the system. So they could be managing those sprint boards that we were just showing in ServiceNow, and these are the stories. So that the PM would get visibility into these stories. They could still use this as a stand-up meeting and manage the update of those particular stories. Or these stories could actually be integrated into your Agile tool of choice, but you're still getting that visibility here from an overall tracking progress perspective. So the one thing you'll notice here in terms of setting it up to get that visibility is with your project plan, it's going to automatically have these phases in your project schedule phases. And in this case, I've got the actual waterfall tasks, but I'm actually managing those here in a quote-unquote Kanban board using the visual task board capability. So even though I've got waterfall tasks, I can still manage those here in a Kanban iterative fashion. But to set up the overall sprint here, this is called an Agile phase. And so what you do here is you come in here and you can set up your Agile phase. And so when you set up your Agile phase here, you identify the team. So it's team-based based upon your Scrum. And then you identify the specific sprint. And once you do that, then you add that particular Agile phase. So that's what I did here. I selected that particular group and team. And so I can come in here and edit that information so we can see that particular phase. So you can see here I had this career app development team. We've got the sprint here that I've included. And that's how the actual stories are rolling up here for the project manager to get that visibility. So that's how you can manage those hybrid projects with those waterfall set of activities as well as those Agile phases and be able to consume and get visibility into those Agile development activities, i.e. those stories. So that's kind of what I wanted to show there from what's new in Agile. The one last thing I'll do here based upon time and questions, we'll kind of go in here and look at things from a safe perspective. So I could come in here into the safe board. So the safe board here really is kind of 3-tiered. So we can start off here at the portfolio level. So this is where we come in here and we have our overall board here. And we're going to plan all of our epics. We can obviously come over here and manage the overall backlog at the portfolio level. Next, we can come down to the Agile release train. So this incorporates your program increments as well. So in this case here, we'd look at all of your features here. So SAFe introduces the topic of features. ServiceNow introduces that in terms of the SAFe as well. You can come over here and look at your planning. So this planning board is typically what people use here from a SAFe perspective. This is similar look and feel, if you will, to that program view that we showed there from just Agile 2.0. So you've got your different teams here. You can toggle between features and stories. You've got your different program increments that you can look at managing here as well. You can also then tie and see the different dependencies here across the different teams and the different sprints. So this is kind of your view from an Agile release train. And then you've got your traditional, so this is basically the Agile 2.0 down at the team level, right? So the traditional backlog capabilities. Here's the triage board that we showed earlier. In this case, I don't have that set up here in this safe view. And then I can come over here and do our sprint tracking, just like we did in the Agile 2.0. You can see here that there's safe stories, so they're a different entity. I still got that same list capability here to come in and do tasks, as we can see here, or I can toggle over and still do my tests as well. In this case, the test has already passed. So that's the example there. So what I'd like to end with is just kind of going back to the presentation here. So we wanted to thank everyone for participating in our webinar today. So if you'd like, you could definitely schedule a deep dive product demonstration with your team as a follow-up. So I'd be more willing to do that. We could also come in and do an implementation roadmap workshop. Could be a discovery workshop to understand your next implementation phase. And then we can assist you with that. You could schedule a session to kind of review some of those portal reporting solutions. So we could give you a detailed review of that. We can also design and implement your specific portal review. Also, we do implementations every day, so we could assist you with implementations. That can be full-blown end-to-end implementation, or you can tap into our advisory guided setup engagements, where we're going to help you define the solution and then actually define the stories, and then guide your internal team for the configuration of the solution. So those are common next steps. So feel free to reach out to us if you'd like to participate or like to take advantage of some of these new capabilities and implement those in your organization. So thanks again for everyone's time today. We really do appreciate it.